Well, welcome to today's workshop on stress and resilience. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. My name is Tracey West and I'm a health and wellness coach based in Stratford. I've been coaching for about 15 years really, and before that actually was in retail. So used to a very stressful environment, went on to do a lot of coaching in retail to a lot of stressed leaders, and then moved out of corporate to start the health and wellness coaching about a couple of years ago now. So let's kick off then and start off talking about stress. So we all know what it feels like to be stressed. But sometimes it's not really very easy to pin down exactly what stress means. So when we say things like this is stressful or I'm stressed, we might be talking about situations or events that put pressure on us. For example, times where we have lots to do and think about, or don't have a lot of control over what happens. The other way we can feel stressed is when we are being placed under pressure, and the feelings that we get when we have demands placed on us that we find difficult to cope with. But actually, what happens when you get stressed is very interesting. So I don't know about you, but when I get stressed, my jaw clenches. I get sometimes if I've had a really bad night's sleep, I can wake up with really stiff jaw. My neck feels tight. I get it in the shoulders. My heart beats faster. And sometimes when I'm really, really stressed, I can even find myself doing that with my hands and balling them into a fist. And this is your body's alarm bell saying, oh my God, you're stressed. But there is just so much more that goes on other than those outward symptoms that really does have an effect on your body and your brain. So let's just take a little look at what happens to your brain first, and then how that impacts on your body. So the first thing that happens is that your brain will be confronted with this stressful situation, and it signals to the center of your brain that deals with your emotions. And that part of your brain starts to figure out what the hell is going on and decide, is it really dangerous? You know, are you really in danger? And if so, then it sounds an alarm to the command center in your brain, and that turns on a response called fight or flight. So you may have heard of this response. But this is really called this because of what we used to be like way back in prehistoric days, when all we had to worry about really was trying to kill our dinner really and go out and sort of find our food. And when we were cavemen, what our brains did was really to say, look, you're faced with that big saber-toothed tiger or that big woolly mammoth. Are you going to run away, or are you going to fight it? And this is why our brains do this sort of natural reaction. What happens to us, though, is fascinating, because once we have this decision that we're in a stressful place, our body starts to pump itself with some hormones called adrenaline and cortisol. And you may be aware of those two hormones. There's many others that occur, but these two are probably the most known. And these adrenaline and the cortisol just pump around your body really, really fast, but they're getting you ready to fight or to run away. So what happens is it pumps blood to your muscles so that your muscles are working more effectively. It gets your heartbeat faster. You also have, interestingly, your airways open so that you can start to run, and it releases sugar into your bloodstream to give you energy to really just go out there and do what you need to do. Hopefully fight the woolly mammoth and not run away. Well, actually, cleverly, the brain will continue to help you in this way. So it will continue to feed you with these hormones until that dangerous moment has disappeared. And it will then hopefully kick in by sort of putting the brake on and then allowing you to rest. And this is what should happen, particularly did happen probably when we were cavemen. However, in this day and age, what happens now is we're living in such stressful times that we find it very difficult to switch that high stress reaction off. And I don't know whether you've experienced it. I certainly did in retail, but when I was working at Christmas time and I was putting the sale on and I was working all the hours God sends, my body was in overdrive for such a long time that as soon as I went off on holiday on Christmas Eve, everything kicked back in and I'd get the flu or a cold or something. So that immune system would kick back in and everything else would start working again because that dangerous moment was gone. But this does have some implications on your health if you are constantly in a high stressful state. So what I'd love to ask you now is, how do you feel when you are stressed? You know, does anybody have any particular triggers that you know put you into that position, or do you know how you react when you're in a stressful situation? Can anybody offer their thoughts?
I start to get the shakes.
Okay, yeah.
I used to work in very stressful situations, sometimes very aggressive people. And you learn how to deal with them, obviously, but it doesn't stop sometimes when you feel particularly physically threatened. It doesn't stop the adrenaline pumping, and
No.
it used to make me shake, physically shake.
Yeah, I can understand that.
My voice, I mean, everything.
Yeah.
Used to shake. Yeah.
It's quite amazing how we all suffer differently in these moments of stress, and you know, it's quite interesting to hear how different people experience it, but also for you to know what happens when you start to get those triggers. Anybody else want to offer their thoughts on this?
I tend to, I've had very stressful jobs over the years and managed huge amounts of people. So I tend to initially be okay with it, but I get to a point if I don't know what to do. So I've tried everything possible and it doesn't work, then I tend to almost shut down. So I zone out. And the other thing I notice is, this is possibly too much information, my bowels go very funny. And I feel physically sick, physically like I'm going to faint. And I get the shaking as well. So it takes a lot to get me to that point. And you say about triggers, I know about triggers, all right. It's all right. I've had some very nasty things happen to me over the years, and I have the flashbacks and everything.
Yes. And sometimes those flashbacks are actually quite useful, aren't they? Because you can start to sense where you're going to head into a very stressful situation.
It's about managing them. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks, Rachel.
That's all right.
Sorry.
Someone in the chat's just said that they don't have much patience with anything when they're stressed, and their heart goes faster, and they also get older.
Brilliant. That's quite a nice link to my next piece, particularly around patience and how we emotionally deal with stress. I think it's a good news that what we're about to talk about, it will give you some options as to how to deal with these stressful reactions. And so what I want to do now is really sort of look into emotions and how that has an impact on how we deal with stress. So this is where really emotions count, and this is called emotional intelligence. You may have heard the term, but simply put, it's all about awareness and what actually is happening in your head, in your inner world, and in your environment, in your outer world. So it's looking at two elements. So let's just have a look at those, and I can tell you a little bit about what parts of that you can possibly develop to help you be more aware of when you're feeling stressed. So let's look about what goes on inside your head. Now, there are two elements to be aware of here. One is self-awareness. We've just talked about that. But this is to be able to be self-aware when you know how you feel. So start to be dialing up. I know how I feel, and I know how I'm going to react to whatever it is that's happening to me. And you can actually develop this by writing a journal. And so a lot of people that I talk to that are trying to increase their self-awareness, one of the things they can do is write a journal and write down how you feel, what you're thinking, and just start to get to see if there are any patterns to your thinking behaviour, and if certain situations cause you to go into a stress response. So a journal is a really good way of starting to develop that more acute focus on your self-awareness. And the other thing here is how you then take responsibility for how you're feeling. So once you're aware of your emotions, so that piece of impatience, you're feeling a bit impatient, you're feeling a bit frustrated, to then be able to just take a pause and be able to respond in a more conscious and considered way. So the two things that affect your inner world within emotional intelligence are your self-awareness and your self-control. I'm going to look in a little bit about how you can actually develop those a little better. So that's your inner world. So let's go back and take a look at those elements that you then look at in your environment. So once you're more self-aware of those emotions, and then you've taken time to consider the reaction that you're going to have because of that emotion, the next step is to be aware of your empathy to others around you. So how do you then share that emotion with your family, with your work colleagues, with your friends? And when you're clear on how they interact with you in that situation, how do you build stronger ways of communicating and developing that relationship so that it's more positive and there's a more positive impact? So in summary, I suppose, your being self-aware can have a positive effect on your emotions, which then can positively impact your relationships and can have a positive impact on your environment, reducing any unwanted stress. Now, if I give you an example here, if you've got children at the moment, I'm sure that you are or have been a little stressed by recent restrictions, which has meant you are trying to homeschool your children and also working at the same time. Now, if you're in that position, as I am right now, what you may find is that you may be doing a bit of work and you can hear your children running a riot around you. Maybe you're on a conference call, maybe you are teaching on virtual, but in the background you can hear children, they're running around, they're not doing what they should be doing. And your first reaction is you start to get a bit stressed. And so what happens is, if you think about what your body's doing in your brain, you start to get into that fight or flight reaction. And many of us, me included, would probably end that conference call and then go out and shout at the children. But what that is then doing is, before you've even recognised what possibly could be happening with the kids, you've almost already disrupted that relationship. You've upset your children, you've upset and stressed yourself out, and then that has a longer term effect on your environment. And so you may be talking to friends that are in situations like this right now and are ringing you for a bit of advice or a bit of support. But what we can do is learn to be aware that, okay, I'm in this conference call and I'm starting to feel a bit angry, a bit frustrated. So take a moment, pause, and think about, right, what have I got within my control that I can do in a situation to find out more information and to be able to understand the other person's position. And so you could then go out and talk to your children and explain the situation you're in, and how I know that very many times doesn't work sometimes. But you could also think about, so what can I do with my day to make sure that I'm there for the children? Maybe I have to start work early. And this is all of that self-control piece. What have you got within your control that you can alleviate some of the situation? By doing that, what you're then doing is reacting to the relationships in your world, in this situation, your children, in a much calmer way, which then has a more longer term impact on your environment. So that's a very crude example of how this can work. But what it is saying is your emotions play a huge part in your stress, and being able to be more aware of what's happening inside has a huge impact on what happens outside. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay, all right. So I wonder, is there anybody having those types of situations right now that would like to share? Is the lockdown creating any stress for you, and that you can see these type of reactions? Have you had something like this happen just recently that you'd like to share with the group? Please don't if you don't want to, but if there is anything you'd like to share that would help others to see it from another example, then please shout out.
Well, I think the current situation is leaving most people with an underlying stress level that probably isn't normal.
Yeah. And
therefore, I haven't got young children. They're all grown up now. I have got a lovely grandson though, but that's so when you're living with somebody and you're both living under this extra bit of stress, because we're in a situation none of us can control at the moment, under basically what I'm calling almost like a house arrest. You're told to stay at home. It can lead to irascibility and irritability. And I wonder, slightly different question now though, but I wonder where this is going to have this level of stress, albeit it's not a really high one. The mammoth isn't standing in front of me, but I can see him down the road and he's there all the time, so I'm wondering how that level of stress fits into this explanation you're doing, because flight or fright implies it's a momentary decision, whereas currently, of course, it's all the time.
Yes, and you're absolutely right, Caroline, because I think what's happening now in our world today is that the fight and flight reaction is long term. It's not actually switching off. It is constantly at a level which for all of us is not good for our health. It actually can create depression. Ultimately, you can put more weight on because you're eating more to kind of try and calm the stress down. There's lots of little reactions that we have that we believe are helping reduce our stress. It's like having a drink in the evening or a cigarette, but actually it's compounding the problem. So I think hopefully, again, another good link, Caroline, I think I must have briefed you before the session, because we're going to move into now some things that you can do that will give you some opportunity to kind of learn to calm it down a little bit and give yourself a bit of time and space. So let's take a look at the 3 things that you can develop. Okay, so by being more aware of your emotions, you start to increase your resilience, and that's the other part of this workshop. And this can also develop 2 further areas, which is your ability to be flexible and your optimism. So let's take a look at emotional resilience. So resilience is all about finding what works in your environment and using what's important to you to shape events, if that makes sense. It's trying to really give you control to adapt. So the benefits of being resilient is it's quite amazing. If you think about that example that I've just given you around the children, if you were to deal with that in a more positive way, a more conscious way, the benefits are huge. So it helps you focus on what really matters. So you're not distracted by things that are just disrupting you. It increases your happiness in work and at home. It actually leads to a better health and well-being, reduces sickness, and it also increases, in the long term, your life expectancy. So building resilience in your day-to-day life is huge for your health and well-being. Now, what I'd love to know is from you all is, is there an example that you may have that you'd like to share with the group when you think you've been really resilient, and what did you do and how did it help? Has anybody got an example?
Quite sort of simple and a little bit vague in its terms, but just with the current situation, I'm a shielded person. So that's been challenging and frustrating and really quite dull. One of the, I've been doing mindfulness with Jane, who did the session last week. And I think without that, I probably would have gone completely stir crazy through this. And been hugely overwhelmed by it all. It's, as Caroline said, that mammoth at the end of the road, when you're shielded, that mammoth affects every single thing that you do and in your thought and then the people around you, because they're looking after you. So you're, the obligation of that. And so being able to do a bit of work at recognizing my emotions and being able to press pause on them a little bit to process them has been, a huge sort of made a big difference, and I think really sort of developed some resilience to the insanity that could have ensued.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Sarah. I think when I look at the ways in which you can develop resilience, the top thing that you can do is meditation or mindfulness. To be able to take stock, to take a moment and focus on that moment, that present moment, being aware of what thoughts are racing through your mind, but really being able to be present, it really gives you the control on the choices that you make at that moment. Because if you really come into the present and just take a bit of space, it makes everything seem to fit so much better. And there are so many ways you can develop it. I think the workshop we did last week was so helpful from Jane. But there are apps as well that the people can do. So you can download the Calm app on your phone or Heads Up, or you can get a book. But just being able to start spending 5 minutes a day, that's all it needs, just to practice some mindfulness, makes a huge difference to your stress. But there are other things. Sorry,
I was going to say, is it for you, Sarah, then, is it about allowing yourself to feel those feelings as well? Because I'm struggling at the moment because I've just been told by my consultant that I've got long COVID, and I'm having a really rough, I can tell you. And some days it's awful, absolutely awful. And I really thought I was going to go mad, you know. So I found by allowing myself to have those moments of, I suppose it's panic in a way, or like you said, Sarah, thinking like you might be going absolutely potty. As I said to the GP the other day, am I going mad? You know, but it's allowing yourself that. And then meditating or having that mindfulness moment or whatever it is, but finding that time to sort of stop and understand that it's okay, it's normal to feel like this.
I have a friend called Dorothy who one of her favourite sayings is, it's okay to have a breakdown, just don't unpack there.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Because I can't imagine, you know, if you don't allow yourself that time, you can't actually move on, can you?
No, I think you just sort of add to it a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and
there are some situations where you don't have the time. You know, there isn't the time to take. There might be afterwards, but there isn't. You've just got to get through it. When you asked about resilience, I thought about what was a good example, and I gave evidence in a murder trial once, and you're standing in a witness box and you're shaking from head to foot. And I've lived my life in courts, but not giving evidence, and I had to work out how best to get that all under control. And I just put one hand over the other and took a deep breath, and then actually focused on what I was there for rather than the scary bits, I suppose. But it's there isn't always, you can't always go off into
but that's
into your
perfect
zen.
That's actually perfect, Victoria. I think the more you learn about mindfulness, it is actually just what you've just said. I think that, you know, just before you step into something that you're really anxious about, to take that deep breath, that makes a huge difference, bringing in all of that oxygen into the body and calming you down. But brilliantly, that, you know, just focusing on something you could see in front of you. And
it was, I think the biggest thing was actually putting one hand on top of the other, because then they weren't shaking.
Oh, perfect. No, really, really good. So there's a lot to be said about mindfulness, and I think it sits really throughout these three areas that we're talking about. But certainly that is probably one of the biggest things that you can practice that will improve your resilience. Other things are just being around positive people that can then support you and help you, making sure you're organised, you know, and prepared for things. That also is a good resilience developer. And then having creating your personal vision or your purpose, and knowing that you are on a journey to get somewhere. That also helps you overcome obstacles a little bit more positively if you know that you've got that thing that you're aiming for. Okay, so moving on to flexibility then. So now flexibility, when you are faced with those stressful situations, it's being able to adapt and consider other options that will help you maybe to calm down or to move or to find a different way of doing something if this one is causing you a lot of stress. Now, there are two sort of personality types when it comes to flexibility. You've got your planners and you've got your spontaneous people. And what I'd like to do now is I'm going to give you a quiz. So I'm going to ask you some questions. I wonder if you could take your pen, and I'm going to give you two options. So I'd like you to write the number of the questions. So there's going to be 8 questions. So just write 1 to 8 on your piece of paper. And then I'm going to give you an A or a B answer. So if you can just write A or B, depending on which you would choose. And then we'll see how many planners and how many spontaneous people we've got. So first question then, number 1 is, when something unexpected means that I have to change my plans, A, I feel annoyed by a break in my programme, or B, I like the idea of doing something a little different. So pick A or B. Question number 2. Keeping to plan, A, is frustrating, or B is satisfying?
Can you repeat that one?
I can. So question number 2, keeping to plan, so keeping to your plan, is A, frustrating, or B, satisfying?
I think I know what I'm going to be.
Question number 3, I like to decide what to do socially, A, well in advance, or B, at the time? Number 4, I like my life to be fairly consistent, that's A, or B, unpredictable?
Oh,
I like my life to be fairly A,
these aren't they?
or B, unpredictable? Number 5,
Oh, gosh.
I think that A, variety is the spice of life, or B, better the devil you know than the devil you don't?
Oh, variety is the spice of life. All better.
I have an A stroke B.
No.
What I want to do. Yes.
You've got to pick one.
Oh.
It is the variety of life.
Number 6,
Oh, I can't.
dull activities are best. A, done in one go. B, interspersed with more interesting activities. Number 7, I like to A, make quick decisions. B, contemplate the options. And finally, number 8, I work best A, swiftly at the last minute, or B, methodically and steadily. Okay, so I'm going to read you some answers. Now, if you have answered these, then you need to put a P next to them. Okay, does that make sense? A P. So, for example, if you've answered 1A, that is going to be a P.
P.
If you've answered 2B, that's a P. If you've answered the other one to those, you're an S, if that makes sense.
An X.
An S. S for spontaneous. So I will do this again. So if you're a 1A or a 2B, you're a P. And if you're a 1B or a 2A, you're a spontaneous. Okay. So I'm going to run through the planned ones, the P's. So it's 1A, 2B, 3A, 4A, 5B, 6A, 7B, and 8B. So if you've got those, they are P's. And if you've got the other ones, which are 1B, 2A, 3B, 4B, 5A, 6B, 7A, and 8A, you're an S. So, I can't see you all because I've got this screen on. How many P's have we got?
I'm a P.
You're a P.
Oh no, sorry.
Let's have a look. I'm going to just do that.
I've got 5 P's.
You've got 5 P's.
I've got 3 P's.
6 P's.
Oh. What did you get, Emma?
I got 6 P's.
6 P's.
Yeah.
You are very organised, though.
So now there's no wrong or right here, and around flexibility you have to have a bit of both. So you need a little bit of both preferences. The important thing here is that now you know what you are, you need to develop the other muscle. So by doing that,
Rachel shaking her head.
Rachel likes a plan.
I'm an accountant.
Oh.
So developing the other muscle is really important. So putting yourself out of your comfort zone, possibly in situations where you've got to do something that is a little bit alien, or being curious of people that are around you that are the opposite. So if you're married to somebody that is the opposite to you, then ask them questions to understand how they operate, and maybe jump into their world a little bit and learn a little bit about how they are, what they are. But both elements are very important in terms of being resilient, because if you are flexible and organised, then you've got a plan. So you can have different routes in which you want to go, and you can be very detailed in how you're doing it. And spontaneous, you'll just move with the flow, and you'll be very organic in how you make your decisions and adapt. But both preferences are very useful in this area. So learn to adapt to your opposite preference. Okay, moving on. Time is rushing through. So the final one here is optimism. And this is quite interesting, really, because I think if you think about where we've gone so far today, the big thing here is that thoughts shape your experiences. So since your thoughts influence your perception, if you think about all of the things we've talked about, your thoughts, trying to switch them off when you're being mindful, they are so big in your brain. They make you do things. And what we need to do is influence them to be positive. So positive and supportive thinking can create positive and supportive outcomes. Now, I know that may sound a little bit out there, but actually studies have shown that the act of choosing positive thoughts, which is also known as affirmations, has a direct effect on your nervous system, which is quite amazing. It also has effect on your day-to-day experiences, the choices you make, the interactions you have, and actual, your overall outlook in life. So, my question here is, are your thoughts helping you or holding you back? So that's a question either you can mull over to yourself, have a conversation with your friends tomorrow over coffee or while you're working. But it's really important to think, how positive are you when you're thinking? Or do you move to the negative? Do you think about everything's going to go wrong, it's all happening to me? And how can you switch that to be more positive? Now, the way to improve positive thinking is to practice positive affirmations. And this is a growing practice across the world, so it's got many benefits, and it has proven to help break bad habits, reduce fear and doubt, build good habits and confidence. And it's actually just like your friend telling you that you've done a really great job, but you're doing it in your head, if that makes sense. So one way to make affirmations something in your routine is to add it to another habit. So say you walk in the morning. Now, I would say you drive to work. Say you drive to work in the morning, but you probably don't do that right now. So maybe you go out for a walk every day to get some fresh air. So use that habit to use positive affirmations while you're walking. So it might be that you're saying, today, before I start work as an accountant, I am going to be really calm and really confident. And this is my affirmation. So as you're doing your 10-minute breakfast walk before you get started on your day on the virtual, you're saying to yourself, today I'm going to be calm and confident. And you say it in that way over and over. And then you start to, it starts to build up in what you're thinking and doing, and it becomes a much more positive way of looking at the world. So positive affirmations is a really good way of pushing you into being more optimistic. But I'll leave you with that question there. about, are your thoughts helping you or are they holding you back? Okay, so we've travelled quite swiftly around this person's head. We're on to the last blob, which is creating your own SOS plan. So this is really something, what I want you to think about as we finish today is, as we started it, we talked about what are your stressors. So think about what are the things that stress you out, and put it on a piece of paper, write it down, but also think about what is your reaction to those stressors. How do you respond at the moment? And then what I want you to think about, based on what we've covered today, all the possible ways in which you could distract yourself from the stress. And then I'd like you to pick 3 and have a go at them. So that's your stress plan. So name your stressors, then think about how you react to them, then think about all of the opportunities you have based on some of the things we've talked about today, mindfulness, being more adaptable, resilience, using your emotions, self-awareness, and choose 3 that you think are quick wins that you could do quite easily and start having a go tomorrow. And to finish, just a few final things just to help you, you know, just a few more tips on the old, moving the screen about. So they do say start your day with a smile. It's, you know, when we're stressed, we have a lot of tension in our neck and in our brows and in our head, and it also reinforces all that negative feeling when you're carrying all that tension. So smiling, it relieves that residual stress. So start your day with a smile. Exercise, get out there, even if it's just a 10-minute walk every day, that helps. Stop saying you're busy and start doing things. So the more you moan about how busy you are, the more stresses you out. So stop telling yourself you're busy and just get on with it. Make yes a choice, which is just don't say yes to everything. Try and take one thankless thing off your plate if you can. Spend time with the right people, and then find joy in missing out. So don't try and do everything. So, you know, sometimes we all want to be a part of it. And at the moment, I suppose, being in lockdown, we're not. But just find the joy in not being part of everything that's going on. And that's it. So thanks for your attention, everybody. I hope that's been useful.
Tracey runs Purple Hat Coaching Company, and I know she's got lots of plans for this new year with Facebook groups and Nordic walking. Find her on Facebook, your website as well.
Yes, yeah, I've got a group on Facebook. I've just started this week actually to help people keep to their health and wellness goals, to fight that stress a little bit, a bit of a support group. We're doing some live streams of video advice. There'll be podcasts on there, any books that I'm reading that I think would be useful, and general chat about our New Year's resolutions if we're finding it a bit tricky to keep to them. Also, yes, as soon as this lockdown's over, I'm going to start some Nordic walking classes in Stratford. A great opportunity to get outside, talk to your friends, hopefully fight a bit of that stress off, but it's also a little bit more of a workout than just a general walk, because it helps your upper body as well and your core muscles. So keep an eye out for that too. But thanks for joining me, everybody. It's been really, really good fun meeting you all. I hope it's been useful.